Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming along this morning to this drive meeting. I'm Helen, and I'm going to have a chat to you today about how to beat procrastination by understanding executive function. Okay, long title to start with. Let me just have a look at what procrastination might mean to start off with then. Um, Okay, that's it. What I'm talking about is the kind of situation where you just know what you need to do, but you just can't get yourself started. So a bit like our dog friend here, um, sums up the feeling really. And the kind of thing you might feel is what I've got listed just here. So you might think, well, maybe I'm just lazy, or maybe I don't care enough, or maybe I just don't have enough willpower or discipline. And if I could only just, I just need to get on with it. What's my problem? Um, and we've got in the session today, we've got lots of coaching people and people who are very experienced at helping others. So I'm hoping you've probably got past this negativity, but it's very, very common. And I work with a lot of students and business owners to help them with their executive function, and I hear a lot of people giving them this kind of this kind of self-talk, like, oh, you're so lazy, why don't you just get on with it? Um, and it's not a pleasant situation to put yourself in for obvious reasons. You don't want to beat yourself up. It's not nice at all. But it's just not very effective a lot of the time. So it can work in that, if you put yourself under enough pressure, eventually you'll get started. And also, it can work in that, that the self-assessment deadline in January is evidence of this. That if the pressure of having a fine gets high enough, you might do your taxes at the last minute. And I see that with a lot of the students I work with as well. They leave their assignments till the night before because it takes that long, and that much pressure to get them to move. But it's really not efficient, not a good way of living your life, and really uncomfortable. So, what I'm going to do is suggest some more healthy, pleasant, effective ways of dealing with this procrastination situation than just being really hard on yourself. Okay, so these are executive functions that I'm going to be talking about, and they are a list of mental processes that enable you to get stuff done, basically. And if you think of them as like a Swiss Army knife, so there's sort of a whole load of different tools all working together to help you get stuff done and execute things. That's where the name comes from. So there's no definitive list of executive functions. What you've got is a number of different psychologists and psychiatrists working on this, and they've all got their own kind of framework. So it's quite complicated. So what I've done is there's a couple of psychologists called Peg Dawson and Richard, I'm not sure how you say that, Guar, um, who've put together a list of executive functions that just work best for everyday life. So they're not the kind of academic ones that are hard to apply. They work for everyday life. They are still quite long. So I apologize for all the text on the screen, but I think it gives you a good overview. So I went with it. But yeah, here they are. I've coloured in the ones that I think are most important for this session so as not to overload your brain, because that's what we're all about doing here. So let me run through the really important bits for procrastination here, and don't worry about taking everything else in. Um, so what we've got is a whole series of functions around things like planning, organisation, time management, goal setting, that kind of thing, as a summary. So the first thing that's interesting here is the orange one, which is task initiation. That's getting started, getting tasks started. So that's what a lot of procrastination is about. You can't initiate that task. So first thing to know is that it's separate from the other processes. It works together with them, but it's a separate thing. So often what you think is, well, I can do the planning. I know what I need to do. Why can't I get started? That's because it's a separate process. Okay. So just because you've got all the planning, you've got the time, you've got the space, doesn't necessarily mean that you can automatically get started. That's important. So one thing you can do about that is kind of break it down into the just why can't I get started rather than thinking about the whole task from start to finish. Another thing that's quite important here is the working memory, which is also well, it's in blue. And often our working memories are much smaller than we think they are. So your working memory is the bit of your memory that's like a clipboard. It holds information in your head while you're working on it. So the sort of memory you use for doing like mental maths, that kind of thing, although it is much broader than that. So yeah, it's smaller than you think it is. So that's worth keeping that in mind because it's easy to overload it. So that's another reason you could be having a problem with procrastination. And also with these functions, they look quite kind of mechanical at a first look. We're kind of reducing ourselves to robots a bit, maybe. But if you have a look at the other blue thing there, um, emotional control is in there. So your emotions are part of this. Um, so, for example, me with mental maths, I'm not terrible at maths if you give me a piece of paper and a pen, but if you get me to do mental maths, I will completely freeze up because the kind of stress of being on the spot means that my working memory gives up temporarily. So that's how your emotions can get in the way. Just a quite a simple example, but obviously there could be a whole lot more going on there as well. So we all have strengths and weaknesses in these executive functions. Some people are better than at others, than are better at some and not so good at others. The people I work with are neurodivergent, and often they will have more extreme strengths and weaknesses than neurotypical people. So something that's quite important here is if you are working with somebody who is neurodivergent, some of these things could well be a lot harder for them than you would expect for a neurotypical person. And if you have a quick look at the list, you'll see that even if you have extreme difficulties with one or two of these things, it's going to have a big impact on your life. So, for example, I work with someone who is autistic and got ADHD, and he has very little concept of time. So he doesn't really know what 10 minutes feels like. So he has real difficulty working out what he can fit into 10 minutes or an hour or a day, which means he's always late for everything. Um, and I can't give, it's not fair to think of him in a negative way because of that, because it's not his fault. It's not something he can do much about. He can't magically give himself a sense of time. That's something that his brain does not have. So yeah, I think another part of this is just be sympathetic towards other people because you do not know what challenges people have with these things in their own head because you can't see it. Also worth noting that executive functions are reduced by things like tiredness, chronic illness, mental illness. Anything that affects your brain can make you less efficient in terms of executive functions. Um, so as you can see, not, procrastination is not just, well, it isn't really generally, in my experience, about laziness or lack of willpower or anything like that. It's much more complex, and I think we would do much better to give ourselves and other people, cut people some slack and just understand what could be going on beneath the surface. With that in mind, though, as we are business owners, self-employed people, freelancers here, um, that can make this even more difficult. I will give you some tips soon, honest. It's not all doom and gloom. So owning a business makes really high demands of your executive functions. For example, you've got no boss to give you the structure, goals, and deadlines, that sort of thing. So you've got to work that stuff out yourself, which is all executive function again, and it's quite difficult and it's quite tiring to do that and to stay with the goal and stay with the structure and not wander off track. We have to wear many hats, so that context switching from one kind of job or task to another is hard work, hard on your executive function. Um, so you could be, for example, doing your own books, delivering the service that you deliver. You could be fixing your website, being your own social media manager. That's hard on your executive function, and it's not something you tend to do in a typical job. You tend to do roughly one kind of task with one kind. It's much more structured. Okay, we have variety in jobs, but it's kind of off the charts, varied when you're running a business. Okay. And then you've got the high emotional stakes. So often it's really personal, isn't it? And we've talked in these meetings before about the negative doom loop of you don't have much work in for a while, and then you take that personally, and that knocks your confidence, and then you don't do the marketing to get the next load of work in. That's an example of where the emotions can come into this. And there's lots of estimating how long everything takes. So you're doing a quote, how long is that job going to take? How much, so how much do you quote for? Because how long is that job going to take you to do? So yeah, really, really heavy. So it's no wonder our brains look like that pile of cables sometimes, or feel like that pile of cables sometimes. Okay, so what can we actually do then about this sort of situation? Well, um, important thing is that you can improve your skills as an adult. I mean, obviously, it's much easier if you're a child, which none of us are. But as an adult, you've got some ability to improve your skills, but it's going to be much more effective to reduce the load on your brain than to improve the skills. And in fact, you can get some apps that claim to do the brain training and improve this sort of skill. But it's been found that you that mostly improves your ability to use the app rather than being able to apply it to everyday life. So, best thing, reduce the load on your brain. And here are some ideas of how you can do that. And I'll go into a more detailed step-by-step way of doing it in a minute, but just to give you some ideas of what I mean. So things like improve your environment, so reduce the noise, clutter, distractions around you, so it's easier to focus on the task that you've got. Using calendars, planners, to-do lists, time blocking can help as well because you're allocating the task to a slot in your calendar. You've got a breakdown of what you need to do, and if you color code it, it's just easier for your brain to see the higher priorities and maybe the lower priorities. Reduce that context switching. So if like I said, you're going from being, the web designer to the accountant to the bookkeeper to the social media manager, try not to do it. Try and outsource it if you can. Try and automate it. But if you do have to do it, give yourself a gap between those tasks to give your brain a rest so you can switch into a different way of thinking for doing a different task. Um, yeah, I mentioned color coding before. Anything that makes it more visual can really help. So if you've got this big, complicated project or task to do and it's feeling overwhelming, you can color code it. If you draw a mind map out, you can see how the different aspects link together and how you can't do this bit till you've done that bit and so on. So making it visual can work really well. Body doubling, so having somebody working alongside you, not necessarily doing the same work, but just having um, someone there, whether it's in the room or online, seems to help the emotional side of it because you're kind of safer with someone with you. Break everything down into really small steps, so you know exactly what you need to do and what's coming up next. Habit stacking, so if you can't remember to floss your teeth, do it immediately after you've cleaned your teeth, so that a habit you've already got. And then, of course, calming techniques if you to take the heat out of the emotions to enable you to use this thinking part of your brain more. And goes without saying, really, but it's easily forgotten, particularly in with the neurodivergent people I work with. They often forget to eat or drink. But yeah, food, sleep, hydration, take a break, movement, all really important things for keeping you productive and reducing that procrastination. Right. So because picking a selection of things from that list could in itself cause you to procrastinate because it's giving you one more task to do, I've broken that down again into more of a one, step two, step three list for procrastination specifically. So this is what I found with the clients I work with. Again, tend to be neurodivergent most of the time. But we start with the emotions. So you can't think straight if you're in fight or flight mode because your brain shifts to getting you out of trouble and you can't think in the kind of more logical, detail-oriented way that you need to start the task. Also, if you've got your inner critic giving you a really hard time, that's going to be difficult as well. So just referring to, we got a video for that, haven't we? David did a presentation on that a couple of weeks ago. That it's well worth taking a look at that if you've got trouble with your inner critic. So yeah, emotions, take the heat out of the situation. That's where I start with my clients. And then we tend to look at your body and the environment. So if you've not moved in 3 hours, if you've not eaten, if the lighting's distracting, if you're in a noisy environment, that's going to make it really difficult. Put your phone in a drawer or use one of those apps that stop you from being able to use your phone for a while. All those things that just take that distraction away from your brain, from a body and an environment point of view. Worth mentioning also for neurodivergent people, things like lighting, noise, and clutter can have a much bigger effect on them than on neurotypical people. So if you have a colleague and they're just saying, I cannot work in this room, the lights are way too bright, and you're sitting there thinking, their lights, what's the problem? Take them at their word, because it can be for some people very much more of a problem than it can be for others. And if just allow them and just encourage them to go to a different room, because that will mean that they can, much better at getting the task done, and just generally happier and more comfortable as well. Okay, so then when we've looked at the body and the environment, that's when we get down to actually reducing the cognitive load, so taking the strain off the brain. So that can be just simplifying the task, because sometimes, particularly as business owners, we've just got, 5 ways we could do it, and actually one is good enough. So just simplify it. We can breaking it down into small steps so that you don't ever have to think, okay, what do I need to do next? It's right there. And it's clear and you know what you need to do. Takes the strain off. Lists can work really well, although they can get a bit overwhelming. So, you need to kind of rein yourself in and not put everything on the list. Just put the most important things for that day or that project on the list. Like I said, mind mapping is really good. Making things visual works well, and color coding, time blocking, which I mentioned before. Um, Also, the body doubling I've mentioned. Um, I find the just 2 minutes thing works really well for me. So if I really can't face doing it, it's like, well, I will just do it for 2 minutes. And then if it's not working, I'll walk away. But almost always that 2 minutes is enough to get me into it. And then I'm away. I've got over that task initiation issue, and I'm into it. And I find it often easier to keep going than I do to get started. So that gets over the getting started. And then the add some novelty. If it's just a boring task, can you make it a bit more fun? So that could be, if you're in a team, setting up a leaderboard, or it could be having a little reward every so often. Or there are apps that turn anything into a game that you can get, which are really fun. So anything like that. So none of that involves just improving your skills. That's all of that is stuff that you can do right now without actually developing yourself in any way at all. Uh, and some of them are quite simple to do. Okay, moving on. So, yeah, actually, no, moving back. Uh, so I've simplified it a bit. But even that could be source for procrastination. So what I thought was it would be helpful if I could come up with some sort of tool or resource that I could give to people, and it would sort of help them decide what the block was and give them some advice on how to get over it. So I started writing that down, and it was a monster. So I brought it to a drive meeting, and John Torrance said, who is if you're not familiar with him, is our confidence coaching guy. He said, "You want to code that?" And I was like, "Great, I can't code, so this could be interesting." But he was right; it was a great idea. So I came up with a quiz, which I'm launching right now. So no one's done it yet apart from me. So feel free to have a go. The link is right there. So that's helenlindop.com/get started quiz. And I wanted to make it, if you were procrastinating, you don't need one more thing to think about. So I wanted to make it really, really quick. So what's your problem? Here's some ways you could tackle it. And I'm going to send, would you like an email so that it's in your inbox? You can go back to it. As simple as that. So it's possibly even shorter than 30 seconds. And I had to deal with my own procrastination trying to make this thing. So I took my own advice. And the way I dealt with it was to work out what the block was. So, what was really getting in my way. And when I went for a bit of a walk and had a think, the block was that I tend to have a massive scope creep problem. So, if I come up with an idea for a course or a resource or something, it'll just I'll keep adding stuff to it. So I'll be like, oh, it'd be great if it did this, and what about if it did that? And it would be really good if I added this in. And I knew this thing could take a year for me to finish. And that was completely demotivating for me. So I made myself a promise that I would turn it around in a few weeks, whatever it took, which is a bit of a big deal considering I couldn't code. And I've got no experience of no code apps, but I did it. I found it. I found a tool I could use. And it's not perfect, but it's out there, and hopefully people can use it and get some benefit from it. I also broke it down into tiny little steps and made it so that I have an app that I use to keep on track of what I'm doing, and I could tick off every little step as I got there. So yeah, I use my techniques that I mention in the app, and yeah, it took me a few weeks to get this thing turned around and not a year. So I'm quite proud of myself for doing that, just for getting through it. Okay. So yeah, feel free to have a go. It's designed for neurodivergent people, but as I said, we all have strengths and weaknesses with executive function, so you're very welcome to give it a go, whether you are neurodivergent or neurotypical. Okay, so having gone through all that, I thought it might just be helpful to just very quickly explain how I help people with this stuff. So what I do is I help them clarify what they want, because sometimes people are not entirely clear on what they're aiming for, what their overall goal is, and then look at what's blocking them. And it can be a whole range of things. Like I said, I kind of didn't think that scope creep was my main sticking point for this quiz project, but when I had a good think, yeah, it was. And it's hard to see your own blocks sometimes. So I help people with that. And then I help people reduce the load on their brains so they can get what they want. And it's very different for different people. So I'm a very kind of, shall we try this? Should we work with this? Try that this week. How did you get on with that? Okay, let's do more of that, or let's try something else. So it's a very personalized thing, what works for people. And for small business owners, marketing and tech are massive for both good and bad. Um, they can be a massive distraction, they can make things very complicated, or they can make your life much easier if you use them in a way that works for you. So having that background in as an IT trainer and in marketing really helps me with this with small businesses. And I also have experience of working in education. So I work with university students, helping them work out what assignments they need to do, what's being asked of them, and getting them done on time. So all very much executive function based. Okay. So yeah, that's it from me. Quick reminder of the quiz if you want it. I also have a newsletter where I give it's called the Neurodivergent Business Newsletter, but it's mostly, again, around executive function. I don't use those words because it, I try and keep it to actual tips you can take away and use rather than using any sort of terminology like this that might put some people off, particularly if you're completely frazzled and overwhelmed. So I keep it really simple. And finally, if anyone would like a free half-hour session on this to have a chat through anything that is blocking you, you're very welcome. That would apply to any Drive members anytime. And also, if any guests in this meeting, if you want to have a chat, just let me know and I can maybe give you some tips if you're struggling to get started. So that's me done. Thank you, Anne.